System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Left. This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Monday, December 16th. My name is Amin TMK alongside Emoja Lil Tanky Sumler. Emoja, hello. How are you? How was your weekend?
Man, living it.
Living it up in the dystopia, my friend, in the dystopia. I don't know. Maybe you're living good, but I definitely know who's living good. It's somebody who's getting some money from those aid packages in Ukraine. Let's talk a little bit about what happened last week.
Money, man.
You know, we're doing this thing again. I am going to get to it, y'all, I promise. Like, we're doing this thing again where it's like we just forgot. It's not that we forgot to talk about this. It's just that with everything that's happening in Syria, everything happening in Palestine, like there's so much news all over the place, and it all deserves time and it all deserves unpacking. So here we are. Aid packages to Ukraine. It's going down. There is $500 million. That was Thursday, as we are getting ready for Donnie J to take office. As you said, this is a 3-month, tirade of Joe Biden.
It continues.
So $500 million on Thursday. This is after the announcement of the $988 million aid package. They're saying this is, they need this money because they're using it to push back the Russians. I mean, essentially what's happening on the ground, and is this aid gonna help in the fight against Russia?
I mean, here's the thing, right? It's impossible to tell. What I can tell you is this. They were given $50 billion in loan forgivenesses, which, again, as an American, it just infuriates me because, again, Hawaii needs money to rebuild. The Carolinas need money to rebuild. Florida needs money to rebuild. Puerto Rico needs money to rebuild. Student loan forgiveness. Nothing for us. But it's always a new $50 billion here, $50 billion there for these Ukrainians.
This was $988 million and $500 million, by the way. It's not in the billions, although they have gotten many billions.
But they also this week received $50 billion in loan forgivenesses.
Oh, right.
It's not a straight up gift. It's money they have been given before as a loan, and then they canceled the loans.
I like
$50 billion gift.
You're so right. If Visa was like, you know what, you don't even know. Don't even worry about that anymore. I'd be like, that would be a huge moment in my life.
Gift. And we got to talk about that for what it is. That's in addition to the money that's already been spent. So, you think about that, right? Now, here's another thing about that. No one knows where this money's going. It's so funny that this dude that Trump is trying to bring in as the director of the FBI has threatened Zelensky with doing audits. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you don't bring the war to an end, we're going to have to audit what's happened. There was a base that...
Because they're not auditing it now, which is hilarious. But anyway, right. Continue.
There was this base that the Ukrainians had been building since 2014. They received all kinds of money from the Americans and from the Europeans, the NATO partners. It was supposed to be so incredibly fortified that the fortifications were supposed to be visible from space. Russia just walked into that camp and took it last week. They took it in a day. And when they got there, nothing was there. It had all been a lie. They had spent all this money on God knows what bribes, gold-plated Ferraris. I mean, the upper echelon of Ukraine is living such a lavish life, and it's been so known. It's been mocked in culture for so long. You go back and watch Creed 2. He in there with the oligarchs, the Ukrainian oligarchs. You know what I'm saying? Ukraine is listed as one of the most corrupt governments in the world. The EU for years had told Ukraine that they're not eligible for EU membership because there's just too much systemic corruption. What I'm saying is, even if they're given this money, there's no guarantee that they're going to spend it on the military. They don't have people. Here's the one thing that money can do. It can buy you mercenaries, It can do that because there aren't any Ukrainians left. They continue to push for this lowering of the draft age down to 18. Zelensky continues to hold off because he understands, even though he's no longer democratically representing the will of the people at all, that'll be it. That'll be the final straw. If he says, all right, we draft him down to 17, he's worried about his literal life. You know what I'm saying? Because the society is in disrepair. You have old ladies fighting recruiters in the streets. It's not a metaphor. I mean, this is really happening. They're grabbing people off the streets and throwing them in the vans to go to Kursk to get killed. And so we brought that up, right? So in the Kursk debacle, which that's the only way you could describe it now, this Kursk debacle where the Ukrainians invaded Russia, right? Tried to take a nuclear power plant and failed, and just have been stuck in Russia for the past 3 months. You know, really since August. So we're almost on like 6 months. You know, because Zelensky needed to impress Biden to make it look like he was doing something, to make it look like the Russians were weak and defeatable. Well, this is the place where the North Koreans had supposedly been training. And again, I don't think this is even a controversial statement because Russia can have inside of Russia whoever in the fuck they want, right? This is Russia. Russia was hosting North Korean soldiers. We're not talking about North Korean soldiers that are in Ukraine. There's no reports of that. There's no verified reports of that. And even the rumors of the North Koreans, it's only been, I mean, I've looked at those videos. I'm like, I guess they North Korean. Like, if you say they are, you know what I'm saying? They don't really seem to be going into battle the way the Russian forces normally do. Maybe they're North Korean, but it's not like, you know what I'm saying? Like some...
We don't deal with maybes.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's not like HD photo where you looking at the dudes coming in and, you know what I'm saying? But I have heard reports. That North Korean special forces have went into some of these towns in Kursk, dodged through all the minefields on foot, took a town in less than 3.5 hours. And in less than 3.5 hours, there were 300 dead Ukrainian soldiers. You know, so these are the reports that I'm hearing. You know what I'm saying? So, like, these are the first reported uses of them. And again, this is in Kursk. This is not I don't think it's a controversial maneuver at all because this is not what's happening inside of Ukraine proper. This is happening inside of Russia. As far as I'm concerned, it's a policing action, you know? And what's really dangerous about this is it's like Dune, right? Like, these dudes gonna be the Fedaykin. They gonna go and learn the ways of contemporary warfare. Let's say it's 10,000 North Koreans. Then they go back to North Korea and they teach those 10,000 teach 100,000. Those 100,000 teach 500,000. And now you have a state of the art. I mean, it's really a smart way to have a low investment as far as force go that are going to have a huge payoff as far as like radically transforming your military capacity. And this is what we were saying all along. These are the kind of things that the Syrians should have been doing. You know, there should have been 10,000 Syrians in Kursk watching the Russian way of war. Like, all of that, all of this stuff is connected.
Yeah, you need soldiers. You need dedicated people to be involved. You know, and I think, you know, we talked about this a few months back when it always comes to the aid coming in. You know, when Israel seems to need, it gets in the way of Ukraine. And you are now seeing sort of this the situation in Syria, which obviously is still an ongoing situation. But I think that many people in Israel see it as an absolute victory for the Israelis. So you now see that sort of maybe the Ukrainians were hoping that the Russians would spend time in Syria. They would divert more resources and manpower, and that doesn't look like it's going to happen. The bases in Syria that Russia is running is sort of, you know, they're kind of packing up. And you said this because we were kind of having a discussion. So I know people think that we always agree on every single thing. That doesn't happen. But you were kind of mentioning that's just what you have to do because the war in Ukraine is still there and it's right on their doorstep. Do you see a similar thing where Ukraine is kind of like, oh, man, we almost had Russia stuck in Syria diverting their stuff, but unfortunately it didn't happen. So a win for Israel and a loss for Ukraine.
I can't say this enough. Know yourself, know your enemy, and in 100 battles, you will never be defeated. The West continues to misunderstand Russia because they cannot think like Russians. They not for 1 second can they take themselves out of the Western mindset and think, why is Russia involved in this? What are the stakes for Russia? Why are they doing the things that they're doing, right? They assume because the West is hegemonic that Russia also is hegemonic and it will move in a hegemonic way. Like, well, I will threaten your Syrian base if you try to threaten my Ukrainian base. And like for the Russians, they've always said Ukraine is existential. Look, the Syrian Assad regime was a Russian client state. We're doing some business together is the way the Russians would think about it. But I'm not going to give up my core interest, right? So, of course, if the empire threatens a tertiary, interest, I have to let that go and protect my core interest. Ukraine is a core interest. I think the Americans did not for 1 second think that the Russians wouldn't do what they would do. You threaten an American asset, the Americans rush assets into the theater. You will not take, right? Russia, they went with very Bruce Lee, right? Like water. There is more stress here. We will remove ourselves from this place of stress, especially since they're just here to be an ally to Assad. And once Assad lost the will of the people and the army dissolved, is no longer, it's like, we're not going to prop you up, bro. We will help you. You know what I'm saying? But we not, and so like they rightly sensed that it was a trap. And it was a great conversation. I think you and I had it offline, and that was it. It was like, what do you do in this situation? And I said specifically, you give up Syria, and I think the Ukrainians were counting on the Russians to not do that. I think the Ukrainians were counting on 30,000 Russians being flooded out of the Ukrainian theater into the Syrian theater to be sucked up into a long, drawn-out, indecisive, conflict that ultimately was always still going to lead to Assad's defeat, right? And this was let's be honest, this was the same gamble for Kursk, right? When they invaded Kursk, will the Russians pull their army out of Ukraine to defend Kursk? And they didn't. They just brought back more. It's not like the whole Russian army is in Ukraine. They brought some of the army that was not, called to combat and put them in Kursk, which is Russia. And they've taken their time. They've leaned on it. The same way the Americans and the Turks leaned on Syria. And now Kursk is about to fall back to the Russians, which it's Russia. So it's kind of a non-story. It never made sense once Zelensky failed to achieve his primary objective, a.k.a. capturing the power plant, to keep people there. That it's just a force that's now trapped. I've got 50,000, 20,000, however many you have, of your best soldiers and your best equipment locked in this one place. And you can never leave because if you retreat, we'll kill all of you. Right? That's just, I'm so sorry. That's what war is, right? You're pinned down. I'm just not going to let you get up and leave. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so, there's no easy way out. And now they keep coming up with gamble after gamble for like, how can we save? Let's not forget the whole long-range missile situation, which again, even Trump has straight up said he is not for. Right, he does not approve of American missiles being utilized to fire into Russia proper. Right, we'll see if he keeps that position once he's the president, but he is on record of having said that. Right, once again, just to demonstrate how far to the right Joey B is over everyone else, ever, like by a lot. You know what I'm saying? Those missiles were meant to be cover fire to allow the Ukrainian army to retreat from Kursk. And they've continued. It went away for a little while, but they've returned to doing it, earning the enmity of people all throughout Russia. I mean, now you have Medvedev talking about taking more land in Ukraine as a punishment. What's his name? Kadyrov is threatening to send, the Chechen special forces. I mean, these aren't guys you want to, these aren't guys you want to fuck with, man. Like Kadyrov is a dangerous man. He's a scary man. He's a manly man. He's a strong man in the old sense of the word. This dude out there training MMA with Hamzat Shemaev. Like this is a real dude. This is not that Zelensky. I play a tough guy on TV. Sometimes I play pianos. Nah, these are real tough dudes. And these are conflicts of war. So like Zelensky finds himself in a situation where he wanted to be audacious and it has not worked out. And now his ego and his pride has him in a situation that's leading to probably the inevitable collapse of the Ukrainian army. And money can't fix that. Money can buy you some mercenaries, and mercenaries can buy you some time, I guess, maybe. Will it get there fast enough? Will it be able to make a difference? Probably not, Probably not. It's closer to finishing than it is to continuing.
Yeah, I mean, and we actually do watch like the updates every day, and you watch them twice a day. And can you just talk a little bit about like what's actually happening on the front lines and what's been happening for the last few months outside of Kursk, this land
so
grab?
all throughout. So first off, the Russians have almost achieved all of their stated primary goals. They've essentially retaken the Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia. What's the other area? Kherson. These are the areas that make up the greater what's called the Donbass of Ukraine. These are people that are, let's say, ethnically Russian. They speak Russian, and after let's just say the Maidan coup of 2014, when it became illegal to speak Russian in Ukraine, or to be like a Eastern Orthodox, all of that stuff. Like those guys, they had a referendum and they ceded from Ukraine. They declared independence. And I don't understand why it's okay if Taiwan is to declare independence, but the Donbass can't, right? So what happened was the Ukrainians were like, no, you're not independent. You're part of Ukraine forever. And then the Ukrainian army invaded, and then the Russians came to the defense of these ethnic Russians. Well, the thing is, because the Russians didn't do this immediately when the Civil War happened, for years the Ukrainian army had been embedding itself in parts of the Donbass, right? So the territorial integrity of the Donbass is not full, right? The Russians are very close to what those original borders were, and that was their stated goal, is to just push the Ukrainians out of the Donbass and to protect these ethnic Russians. You know what I'm saying? And that's what's happening. I mean, all throughout the combat line, which is hundreds of kilometers long, the Russians are creating these things that are called cauldrons. It's like where your forces jut out ahead in front of cities, from multiple directions, so that everybody, you don't have to take the city, you take the city under siege. There's no way to get reinforcements to the city. There's no way to get more soldiers in. Of course, the cavalry is true. No way to get the soldiers out. You're under drone fire. FPVs are flying overhead. You're in artillery pockets. You're definitely under gunship fire. You know what I'm saying? So they call it, it's called fire control. They put these cities under what's called fire control. So that the militaries, every bullet out is one last bullet you're never going to have, because it's not like the Ukrainians, even when the new package of all the new, latest, greatest American military, how they going to get it to you? Like, it's not Star Trek. Like, you can't, like, just teleport that shit into the city. Somebody has to bring that stuff there. And if these cities are
Logistics.
under, right? If these cities are under fire control, all you got is what you got. And there's been just so much corruption. You know, no matter what they say you have, only the men on the ground really know what it is. And so they end up with these pockets of the Ukrainian army, 100 men here, 500 men there, 700 men there, where they've been surrounded by the Russian army. Russian army don't even got to fire on you. They just got to wait. You know what I'm saying? And these dudes are just surrendering en masse. Like, and a lot of them don't even want to go back to the Ukrainians because the thing is, the punishments are so severe for the soldiers that surrender, even though they're under equipped, they're on a fool's errand. I mean, look, the general in charge of the Donbass in general has been fired by Zelensky over the last week, and they put in a dude who has lost so many battles that the Ukrainians themselves call this man the Butcher because they know that this dude will do whatever Zelensky tells him. They talk about these Russian wave attacks. That's not how Russians fight at all. That is how the Ukrainians fight, and that's how the Butcher fights. He just sends these people in waves after wave. This was the dude that was responsible for Robotina, the wonderful military disaster of 2023, where, I mean, what did they call it? The I can't. It was the striker. What was it? They had this funny name where all of the American APCs would just die. The graveyard of
like Bradley Square.
That was it. Bradley Square, yeah. Where they just had blown up so many, right? That was the general, right? So, like, the Ukrainians are not happy about that at all. They know what that means. They about to get moved forward, go forward. Don't tell me about no scary Russians. Stop being a bitch. Like, that's the answer. Like, the Ukrainian soldiers lack bravery. No, they in a losing fight, man. It's not that I'm not brave. I can't beat John Jones. Me and you can't beat John Jones. Like, it's not about bravery. They're not prepared for this fight, and they're going to die or they're going to surrender, you know? And that's where we are. Like, I don't think Zelensky prepared himself on any level for the fact that the Russians were willing to see it through. He also didn't believe that Russia by itself could outproduce the EU and NATO countries at large as far as their military economy, right? Because economy of scale, the NATO nations spend much, much more on their militaries, right? But everything in American and NATO militaries costs way more than it costs in Russia, than it costs in China, because the state doesn't incentivize profiteering. And so what they're paying for is what it costs. And so even though by money-wise, what it looks like they spend is not enough, because there's not a profit motive behind how those industries are designed, the materials are way more bang for the buck, you know?
At this point, I think talking about, I guess, former President Bashar al-Assad is a Russian subject. He's now a member of the Russian population. He released a statement today. Did you see it? Did you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, man. Look, here's the thing. It's so funny, man, because I respect the role that he played in the resistance, and that is to say he didn't get in the fucking way. You know, he let happen what needed to happen. I see that for what it was. That doesn't make him some great leftist, man. Assad was not a strong leader, bro. And he lost the will of his people, you know? I thought the statement was weak as hell. Bro, you get out in front of a fucking camera and you say something. For all I know, you know, the same dude that wrote Biden's "I'm not going to run for president in 2024" speech is the same dude that wrote that. I mean, you know, it's so PR. It's so sanitized. You know, it sounds like it came directly out of the FSB, which is kind of like the Russian FBI, you know what I'm saying? I mean, essentially the Department of State for Russia kind of wrote that. You know, go out and give a speech you know. But again, man, I mean, I can't get over this dude's car collection, man. Like, this dude got McLarens and Ferraris, and yo, generals can't even buy rent, bro. Everybody in your army is subjugated because they on the low all out there slanging this illegal drug most Americans don't even know about, and it's this go-go military crazy drug in Syria called Captagon, and that's like the only thing that anyone can sell to make a living. So all of his soldiers is out there selling this stuff on the low, while he's driving Ferraris and McLarens and whatnot. Of course, man. Of course he lost the will of the people, man.
Yeah, I mean,
and that statement was some shit.
Yeah, I think when you look at some leaders like MBS or some of the sheikhs in UAE, or the leader in Qatar, or the king in Jordan, and they get to have all the fancy stuff and the nice toys, and they get to drive around in, like you said, the Ferrari and all the exotic cars, the expensive, luxurious cars. And, he wanted that, I think, because he comes from this background of, it's not royalty, but your daddy's the president. And now you the president? Sound like you the king.
And it was supposed to be your brother was supposed to be the president.
Right. And you wasn't even prepared to be the president or whatever. But now you're,
you know what I'm saying? Looking in your eyes and shit.
Thought he was a dentist.
No, he was an optometrist.
Oh, optometrist. Okay. Yeah. But regardless. But, I just think that he kind of wanted that lifestyle, but he still wanted to be like kind of down for the cause and the movement. And you can't really be 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because it just assures that no one will like you. And I think at the end of the day, that's unfortunately what happened. And I do think it is a loss for Palestine. And I agree that there are other opinions on that, but we don't really know what is going on. I mean, I know what's going on. You know what's going on. You know that HTS, they're not some freedom fighters. They're backed by
Biden's already opened up communication with these guys.
And we already talked about
world
it.
We live in.
Yeah, on the last
man.
The last podcast, a broadcast talking about, HTS being on the terrorist organization list. Julani is a $10 million bounty on the man's head. He got warrants. And now it's like, oh, well, never mind. I mean, how can you then trust these people to tell you who is a terrorist and who isn't, and who is a freedom fighter, and what revolutions to back, and what? I mean, come on, y'all. Like, let's wake up. Like, it's about force. It's about destabilizing the Middle East. They did it in Egypt. They did it in Libya. They've been doing it in Jordan. They're doing it in, we read, the Confessions of an Economic Hitman. We know the tradition of economic hit jobs in Saudi Arabia. We know they do it in UAE. We know we do it in Qatar. They're leveraging all of this money, all of these Arab leaders, that if you are trying to be down from Muslims in a joint Arab world or Arab community, you're going to got. And if you don't kind of just accept that reality, you're going to have a trouble working out the, Assad thing. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Like, we live in a nuanced world where there's a leader that hears his flaws, but at the end of the day, he helped the Palestinian people. And I don't think Israel taking land in Syria is a good thing. I think it's a bad thing. I'm going to give a shout out to our podcast listeners. You guys are on podcasts. We're all over. Every podcast you find, we're on there. So just look us up. I want to give a shout out. Oh, you know what I meant to do is check out our Patreon. Yeah, we got a Patreon, and it's available for you. www.com/ Patreon, Inner City Left. Anyway, you know the deal. I'll put the description on the bottom. We are kind of creating a little bit of a community, y'all, and I'm really excited about that. But I do want to give a shout out to our Patreon active members. I keep saying I'm going to do a little thing for y'all, but it's crazy times, y'all. So let's give a shout out to Nikki Enfield, Riggedy Pellegrino, Nat the Rat, Lucy Newman, Samantha Guerrero, Dumpy, Tom LeBeau, Turn Leftist, Kelly Lieta, Dubsy22, Jay Goulart, 94, No Ground, RK, Paula LaPoderosa, Lissa Piercy, Lauren Bullock, Suzette Tav, and Dennis Amadeus. Amoja, my friend, I will leave you the final word. Any last thoughts for us?
Man, these is crazy times. I'm really shocked that the Russians haven't used more Orishniks. You know what I'm saying? I'm happy they haven't. Man, I just grew up as a Gen X kid so terrified of the Soviet Union and what they would do. And like they've been so patient compared to us, man. It's like it's scary when you realize you're the bad guy.
For Moja,
Man,
Lil
activism
Tanky.
starts at home, y'all. Don't tell me about what you're gonna do for Tibet, okay? Tell me about what you're doing in your state.
Well said, well said. For Moja, Lil Tanky Summer, I am Amin TMK. This is the Inner City Lab broadcast. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Love.